Hi, friends. Welcome to the final day of our first week. The Circle Unbroken, rooted in soul and responding in our world. And this final theme is titled Rooted Stillness, the power of resting in being. I like that tagline because it can be easy to feel that stillness is a certain absence of power, or is a resting in power, but not being an agent in a powerful way. That's better put. And yet I've been striving to explore with you the possibility that it is actually this inner state from which all impact that is lasting arises. But we have, instead of rooted in soul, we've turned to the word stillness, which has a lot of implications, just like all these words, right? Is the soul in stillness? Is the soul stillness as we understand it in contrast to noise? And I would say that stillness is a descriptor of the essential state of being. And it is a descriptor when we are realized as a soul, fully realized. But I pulled up a couple different definitions of stillness just to tease the waters a little bit. A pretty standard and normal definition is that stillness is the absence of movement or sound. So it has to do with both movement and sound. In craniosacral and acupuncture and acupressure and things like that, the still point is considered the point where you apply pressure and you pause the dynamic system, the pattern of the body, that is so that the cerebral spinal fluid or the circulatory fluids all pause. So you're pressing it, and then that in that very place, everything is a forced pause. And in this halting, there is believed that when you actually release the pressure point, there's a bit of a reset button that happens, that it opens the person to healing. We could look at this as a kind of containment, holding it in so that healing can remain focused and happen. In a lot of spiritual traditions, it's considered inner quietude. And that word quiet is used a lot in Catholic contemplative circles. That is when you're not just sitting in stillness, but you actually are quiet. Inwardly, there is a kind of a coming into such a presence that there is simply quiet. On a physics level, it's a momentary pause in dynamic systems, often in context of fluid mechanics or wave motion. So stillness is seen as a good thing, and it's a pause in that pattern of movement. And then I think I actually liked this one the best, and that is the definition of stillness, or reaching a still point if you're a surfer. I wrote it down. It's the point of optimal efficiency where the surfer can harness the wave's energy with minimal effort. And I like that one because it's so practical and applicable. And you could say, you know what this means at moments when you're in the flow, in the flow. I'm going to give you two examples, and then we'll move into our meditation. The first example of stillness, inner stillness, accessing the power of being, is in the great movie that I've quoted before, The Peaceful Warrior. And I want to return it, whether you've seen it or not, I think I can explain it well enough. A gymnast who is very caught in being very competitive and being at the top of his game in everything and having everything, meets a gas station attendant that it's based on a true story that this man ends up being the way that this gymnast awakens to the true nature of reality. And in that process, he ends up harnessing his inner capacity and using it to accomplish things he wanted to accomplish. So I'll take this excerpt. The gas station attendant says, "Meet me at the bridge." I don't know, they're going to do some lesson. So the gymnast runs up and he says, "I'm so sorry, I've only got a minute. I realized I've got something I have to do at the gym." And the gas station attendant says, "No worries, this will only take a minute." And he literally picks him up and throws him over the bridge. And then the gymnast is yelling out as he's falling into the water, "Ah!" And then the gas station attendant is just walking on. And the gymnast, of course, is livid and runs up to him. He's like, "What did you do that for? What did you do that for?" And he said, "Well, you wanted to be in the present moment. And what were you thinking about when I threw you off the bridge?" And he was only thinking of being thrown off the bridge. And the gas station attendant, "And you even had a word for this presence. Ah!" It's really funny. But what happens after this is remarkable. Their exchange goes on, and then at a certain point, because he sees that the gymnast just isn't getting it, which is the case for all of us, he grabs him, like right here, he just grabs him and pushes probably an acupressure point of some kind. And the gymnast is forced into a level of awareness that he had never experienced before. And as he was looking around, everything was alive. Everything. A dog running for a frisbee, a couple beginning to kiss. Everything was so alive. And then he came through it and he said to the gas station attendant, "What did you do to me? What did you do? What did you do?" And the gas station attendant said to him, because the gymnast felt like there was nothing going on, the gas station attendant brilliantly said to him, "There is never nothing going on." Well, the gymnast was still in that state. He was still in the residue of the experience, and he made it to the gym, and everyone's getting ready to try out to be a replacement on the vault, on the horse, and he's going to try out. Well, it shows a picture of him in the shower, getting ready, and he's just looking at water because he's so alive, looking at the water falling into his hands. And then he goes out in that state, and the coach is like, "Who's going to go? Who's going to go?" And everyone's pausing, and the gymnast breaks through and he says, his name's Dan. He says, "I'll do it. I'll go." Well, he gives a performance that knocks everybody's socks off. Why? Because he was open to that stillness. He was that stillness. He had the power to do what he had never done before because he was there. This is what we're talking about. It's a sweet spot, but it's not meant to be a sweet spot that is occasional. It's meant to be the sweet spot that you live from. Now, I want to add an additional reflection with this. And this is a story from The Alchemist. And I've used The Alchemist numerous times. And I used part of this story along with other parts at a big conference I used to speak at, Science and Non-Duality. And in the latter part of the book, not the end, but towards the end, the boy is with the alchemist being trained, and they end up getting captured. And while they're in this little oasis where they're captured, the alchemist says of the boy, he can turn himself into the wind. If you can see this, will you set us free? And of course, the boy had never done that before, so he is totally shaken in his boots. And he got so angry at the alchemist. And long story short, the alchemist bides him 3 days to figure out what to do. Figure it out, right? How often we try to figure it out. And so the boy goes out and sits somewhere that's very private on, it's like kind of like an open cliff or ledge, and he's there and he is pondering and praying. And he turns to the wind to talk to the wind, to ask the wind to make it possible for him to become the wind. But the wind says that it doesn't have the power. And then he turns to the sun that shines on everything and knows everything. And the sun says that it doesn't have the power. So this goes on. And then finally, the sun says, well, turn to the hand that made all. And in this moment, it's so remarkable. I get goosebumps when I even think of it. He comes into a really deep place of quiet. It's gifted him by all his diligence up to that point, by his faithfulness to his path. And he inquires, but he inquires always from a way of an open heart, a longing to learn and to know. And at this point, when he becomes really quiet, he has a realization. And the realization is that the world has a soul. And this soul of the world is no different than his soul. In fact, his soul is a part of the soul of the world. Let me see that I get it perfectly right. And that the soul of the world is not separate from him, but rather he is in it and it is in him. And this soul is within all things. But the realization goes deeper there. As he awakens into that, he realizes that if this is so, then he has right within himself the capacity to perform miracles. Why? Because the soul of the world is his soul. And all he needs to do is tap into that. And he does. And as a result, he does change into the wind. And as a result, they end up being free. And there's a great happy ending. The story, of course, goes on with a few other great tidbits in it. That's not the final climax. But that brings us round circle to this being rooted in soul. Stillness being a quality of dropping into presence, of being the presence, lets us awaken to the truth that that alchemist and that Dan Millman and the peaceful warrior came to know. And that is that our very center of being is the soul of the world, and all things are possible. So you'll see in the reflection prompt something quite lovely. Who am I when I stop trying? Who am I when I stop striving? Who am I when I stop trying to know? Who am I when I stop trying to fix? Who am I when I stop trying to move through? Who am I when I stop trying to forgive? Who am I when I stop trying to do anything? Who are you? And then just mirroring the alchemist, the blessing words for today are, I am not separate. What moves through life moves through me. And you can spend your whole life thinking about that, believing it, without actually going there. But the goal of this immersion is that you will go there, that we will go there. So let's go there now. What I want for you to do is we're going to sit just in silence. And each time you find yourself lacking quiet, just ask, who am I below this? and let go again. Maybe your mind going is trying, working on something, reflecting on something. Who am I if I'm not in that, if I'm not that? Just keep posing that question, who am I? Below the striving. Who am I below the knowing? Who am I below the trying? Who am I below the moving through? And we're simply going to sit in the silence. And you may find yourself absorbed, like the peaceful warrior, like Dan did for a few moments, because he didn't stay there. He did become more proficient, but you'll see other things if you watch the movie or read the book. Just keep returning. And if you get caught in judging yourself, return again, return again, return again, return again. I invite you to close your eyes. And now notice that you sit as part of a vast universe, and that even your form is just a pattern of wavelengths, a part of this universe. See if you can soften your sense of the inner and the outer self, and drop into yourself as a field, an open field of wave movement. And now we're going to stay in the absence of movement and sound is what we're going to stay in. Opening ourselves to the spaciousness of all. Returning again and again, who am I if I let go? Who am I if I'm not Kimberly? Who am I? Return again if you are not there. Simply return, simply return. Be diligent, be honest. Stay with it. Who are you if you stop trying? Return again. If you've moved into thought, if you're working through things, who are you if you simply let go? And you don't even need to answer that question. That question's there so that the rest can drop away. And as we slowly bring this meditation to a close, might you just let your palms be on your knees or legs and gently move the hands back and up, back and forth, or side to side, or make patterns. Feel yourself in this physical body. And then when you're ready, open your eyes, bringing the palms together and saying namaste. Namaste.